Our whole focus for probably the 2 years through COVID, which obviously was an added challenge, was to get to 83 grand a month. So we basically just did whatever it took to get there. And we got there and I was super unhappy. I was like, this is rubbish. If this is now an indication of what it's going to be like at 2 million, I don't want this twice over.
Hello and welcome to Founder Stories, the podcast for small business owners. I'm your host, Simon Kalu, and I created this show not only to motivate and inspire, but to give you actionable strategies to take back into your business, shortcutting your route to success. Each week, I'll sit down with real and relatable business owners, uncovering how they've created a business that gives them freedom, creates impact, and makes money. So let's get started. Right, welcome back to another episode of Founder Stories. We are back with the founder of Notepad Studio, Mr. Naeem Alvi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Simon. Honored to be here.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And I wanted you to be one of the first people on the show. We've known each other for a long time, why don't we start there actually? We met, I think, at a Chamber of Commerce event in Birmingham.
Yeah, in Beer Keller.
Which is that still there on Broad Street?
I think it's a differently themed Dutch beer bar now, but it's the same setup.
Yeah, and I remember instantly that we got along well, and I think that's really important in any business relationship. And at that time, it wasn't about, I'm an accountant, I'm trying to pitch you my services. We were just chatting and talking, and that's how we met. So that's a good one for everyone to go to networking events because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I hate them normally, actually. I normally sort of steer towards the people that I know I'll get on with and won't have to talk about business with because I find it so uncomfortable. So that's why we ended up talking.
That business card passing around the table, standing up, doing a 60-second pitch.
Subconsciously, I think I just don't take them for that reason because I don't want to have to force that conversation with people. It's just, it doesn't really work.
Tell us a bit about you, what your business does, just a brief background, and then we can go from there.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, I'm Naeem. Notepad is a branding and content design studio based in beautiful Birmingham.
It is now. It is actually beautiful.
Yes,
getting there.
It's taken years, but we're nearly there. And yeah, we work with quite a lot of big brands. We've sort of pivoted our focus in recent months from working with lots of SMEs to working more with global brands. At the moment, we're working with WWF, Glenmorangie, the whiskey brand, and they're part of LVMH, which is opening up lots of opportunities and stuff. Which is, as an agency,
LVMH is like Louis Vuitton,
Moet Hennessy, the big dogs.
Nice.
And normally they only work with really cool Parisian agencies. So to even be in the conversation at the moment as a uncool Brummie agency it's a really good thing.
Wow.
But that's been a big shift for us. And I think as an agency owner, you always aspire to work with that kind of brand. It's just taken us a while to work out how to do it. And we're that's us. We're 15 people now, full time. Use lots of freelancers as well. It's kind of a hybrid model.
If you were to say we help X do Y, what would that look like?
I think we help purpose-driven or conscious businesses build their brands.
Okay. That's a good place to start because that leads me to my next question, which is why is, I know this because we went through a rebranding process for Grow Factor, which used to be called SRK Accounting. And the main reason I changed the name or wanted to change the name is because when you Google SRK Accounting, it would come up with Shah Rukh Khan, who was a big Bollywood actor. And this was causing a bit of an issue for us. But I didn't really realize till we went through the process why branding is so important. And I think probably lots of our listeners who hopefully are business owners or aspiring business owners won't place enough importance on branding. Why is branding so important?
I think it's the foundation for everything. And I think why that is the case is, by its definition, people are always a little bit unclear by what branding is. And branding for us is is all about perception. So it's the perception you create for either kind of commercial or ideally and creative advantage. So you're trying to create, you know, a perception in the market which fulfills, you know, who you are, but also drives demand into the business and sets you apart in the market. And I think what I mean by being unclear is, for a lot of people, branding is just the way you look, you know, the way you look and feel.
The colour scheme, the logo.
That's it. And that's, you know, the fourth step in our process, the place to start, and the place I kind of implore any business to start, is right in the sort of brand positioning proposition stage. Work out exactly who you're for, what's the value you bring, how can you say that in a totally unique way. You know, we as an agency in the UK, we struggle with our own proposition at times. I think we've cracked it in the last year or so, but there are 27,000 agencies in the UK. And although we feel like we're all saying something different, to the buyer, to the marketer that's going on the websites and, you know, pulling our websites up in 5 different tabs and flicking through them, we all sound the same. You know, we're all award-winning, global practices, creative, driving meaningful change. It's all just nonsense that, you know, that like there's a, I don't know, I think we're the worst at promoting ourselves in agency land. We forget about all the things we teach our clients. And but we've realized recently that is an opportunity for us, because we can be much more kind of benefit focused.
I think for me as well, people think branding is this small piece, but actually it's defining your ideal customer. Then what's your voice in order to attract that customer? And that's, you know, a good business will do 3 things, right? It will attract potential customers. It will convert the ones that you want to work with, and then you'll be able to deliver to them excellent value or service or a measurable return. And so in the first place, if you focus on lead generation and attraction, unless you know who you're going after, how you're going to speak to them, what are their, you know, wants, needs, desires, what keeps them up at night, and then therefore how do you position yourself? Yes, in terms of look and feel of the brand, the color, the tonality, the logo, the font, all of these things happen, but that's such a tiny piece of what you guys actually do, right? It's not like you're the same as someone on Fiverr creating a logo for 60 quid.
No, which is, you know, it still amazes me that those people are able to charge 60 quid for that service. It's of such value if it's done well. But yeah, I mean, that's you know, it's 1/3 of our process. It's you know, and it comes right after the strategy, the positioning, the proposition, the tagline. Everything is you know, proper concrete and set in stone. And more importantly, everyone believes in it in the company, because you know, I think with Growth Factor, it's a good example of this. You know, we're not only, you know, changing the name of your business, we're trying to sort of elevate the proposition. We're trying to find what makes you unique. But as a founder who's had SRK Accounting as a name for so many years, it's deeply emotional. And you're basically telling them to change the name of their child, and we're going to recommend what they should be called.
So I remember the day when you turned up to present the different brand propositions, and it's like real nervousness. Are you going to like this? And you almost go into it with I'm not going to like anything.
Exactly. And we've had that, man. Like we worked with a tech company last year who we actively said right from the beginning, we have to change your name. Like it's a good name, but it's not right for where you're going. Well, I reckon we probably went through 300 names over the course of about 6 months. And all we found was that, you know, actually the team love their existing name. They really understand how it could link to the proposition. And if we lean into the proposition a bit more and the name is just the name, then we can make it work. But, you know, we had to go through that fight with them to make them understand that it was doable, but they would have to kind of compromise on certain other things. And we got there in the end. But yeah, naming is painful.
And people, that's a link to what was going to be one of my final questions, but I'll bring it forward. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker said that. Who is, you know, one of the gurus in scaling, running businesses. I've got every one of his books. I haven't read all of them. I've listened to all the audiobooks. But if you can create a culture internally that's positive, where everyone understands what you understand as a founder and understands the mission you're on, they may not execute delivery to the same standard as you, but they'll have the same intention. and it will be a cohesive unit, a team that works together. So for me, I found that the branding exercise, which includes creating your own values and really getting your team to understand what those values are, mean that every single day when they're making decisions on a daily basis about how do I, what should I reply to this client? Is this in scope or out of scope? How would Simon or Yasser, growth actor, want or name at Notepad want me to deal with this, so they can start to make their own decisions? They can reference the brand.
Well, that's vision, isn't it, as well? And I think that's something I've kind of always tried to just do. Everything in Notepad is based on the things that I felt were missing when I worked in agencies. So I looked at what worked and what didn't work. And the things that didn't work for me were, complete transparency on where the business was going and why it was going, where it was going, how we're doing. We're completely open internally with our finances. We show them the P&L and everything every quarter, and that's quite a scary thing to do as a business owner, especially when it comes to conversations around pay rises. But I think that level of transparency fosters real trust and treating them like adults rather than children. So I think brand is the perfect framework to do that. It's hard to put a framework around that stuff, but if you've got really clear values, if you've got really clear internal positioning as well as external positioning, and I think that's one thing with the growth factor kind of repositioning. I don't know if it's kind of stood the test of time, but I remember the central sort of tagline proposition we came up with was small changes, big impact, because you're all about tweaking small things and having a long-term big return. And as a customer of yours for 5 years or something, that is how you work. That's it's authentic to who you are. But what's so important about those taglines, whether it's just do it or think differently, or the taglines we all know from the brands that have made them happen, is they're as much for the internal team as they are the customer. The customer gets it. It's your attitude. It's how you do things. But more than that, I think if you're informing your team that you just want people to make a 1% improvement every day, the compound sort of improvement of that is massive.
No, you're right. And actually, before we get more into this conversation, because we're starting to get into it, and I think that's really valuable for listeners, but just so they've got some context to you, why did you get started? Why didn't you just stay in the job that you were in? Like, give us a bit of background to why you started Notepad. I know you alluded to the fact that you were working in an agency and you weren't necessarily happy with the way that they did everything, and you thought you could see a better way. But there's a big difference between seeing a better way and being willing to take the risk, the responsibility, and almost, as you know, running a business is almost like a punishment sometimes in terms of stress and anxiety,
all the time,
tiredness, and never switching off and all of that stuff. So why did you take that leap?
I think at the time, it was all the things you were saying. The agency I was working in actually was great. It was one of the better agencies I've worked in, but having worked in a few of them, all the way from kind of small ones to the big ones in London, I was well aware that there were a lot of flaws in the way that we were, delivering the work we did. So quitting wasn't so much a case of like, I'm going to quit, I'm going to build a better agency. It was, I'm knackered. I want to go back to being freelance again. So I'll pack this in and I'll work out what I'm going to do. And really quickly, I just sort of positioned myself as a brand strategist in Birmingham, looking for work. I did lots of public speaking and stuff. I just won loads of clients. And, it was obvious that there was a real need at that time in the kind of SME landscape for support, in terms of brand positioning and proposition work. That then led to, natural conversations around the design of the brand. And so I hired Will, that you know well, as a freelancer at the time. He was running his own design studio, managed to sort of partner with him, and he started doing the design work for us. And then over time, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I really enjoy working with people. I can't just do this on my own. So I offered, Will a job, and unfortunately he accepted. And from there, we've just kind of accidentally grown this business. And I've realized only until really recently, I think, that I really enjoy it. As hard as it is, they always say, if you take that leap, you're never going to be able to go back into work again. And I couldn't, I think I've always naturally had a bit of a problem with authority. I think that stems from
Yeah, me
you
too.
know,
Do you think
upbringing
that's
and
a
everything,
commonality in people starting their own businesses? Like I always used to get in trouble at school. At school, when I went to state school, I used to get all of my work done in the first hour for the whole day, which my wife thinks is just a lie, but it's not. It's true. And then I would just, beep about for the rest of the day until I got kicked out of the classroom.
Yeah. I was the same. One of the running jokes in my class, my English class. I went to a state school as well. And we had those amazing, horrible huts that you learn in. You know, when there wasn't enough room in the school,
like the porter cabin,
the freezing cold huts
as well. Yeah.
So our English lesson was in those, and because I'm Alvi Alvi Assinder now, but Alvi in the register, I used to get thrown out of the class almost immediately, and it was normally me and a guy called James Abbott, who James still connected with me on Strava. Actually, we both used to get thrown out very quickly because we were just gobby and laugh. I laugh like a dolphin, as you know, so that would annoy people. And then she would take the register, Mrs. Redmond, and I feel for you, Mrs. Redmond, if you're listening. But she used to then have to go through the register and go, name, and I'd be out the room and go, here, and then that would obviously get a laugh again. And it was every single English class. And oddly, English is my favourite subject. You know, I studied journalism. So, yeah, so I think absolutely it does stem from I realise now, looking back, as much as I think I was good at the work, I probably wasn't the best employee. I think I challenged way too much. I must have been well annoying. Constantly telling people how they could be doing things better and trying things that I haven't been told to do, because I think like that would lead to a better outcome. When actually in an employee, as much as you want healthy challenge and that level of two-way respect kind of thing, I think I probably pushed it too far.
Yeah, it's a balance. Although I think that in the right organization, maybe Notepad never starts and you actually go right to the top of that organization because they recognize that you could be a potential owner.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that is the case, you know, in a more, polished sort of environment that because all it is really is an exchange, isn't it? So it's, do I want to work hard for this, and do I feel fairly, paid and recognized for that work?
Is there somewhere for me to progress? So I guess now, well, actually, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. I wasn't going to speak about this, but actually it's really important. I'm reading a book at the moment called Rocket Fuel. It's part of the EOS training system.
Oh, yeah. I've read one of those.
Yeah, it talks about visionaries, because in my own business, I've been struggling with deciding what to do next, whether to start bringing in and hiring a managing director, hiring a head of marketing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that now, having spoken to my mentor. He's kind of built and sold 10 businesses plus for 25 million was the smallest one and things of that nature. So we have a different plan. But he agrees with the philosophy of the visionary and the integrator, I think it's called.
Okay.
So the visionary will be usually the founder, because they're the one coming up with all of the ideas, and you love to create great ideas, but you don't necessarily want to follow them all the way through. So you might have a new process of how you'll send proposals to clients, but you don't want to go into the software and set the whole thing up. You want someone else to do that. That's your integrator, someone that actually runs the business for you. I know when you started, you had Will. So he's your creative. I guess at that time, you're having to be the visionary and the integrator.
Yeah.
What's your position now? What does the staff and the team look like now at Notepad?
Well, we're one of the things I've tried to do from the beginning, completely aligned with what you just said, is my view was, as much as I could hire a fairly junior team and try to train them up over the years, I knew it would be a quicker route to growth if we could afford them to hire a senior team. So, to hire people that can take some of that responsibility off me. So, we have an amazing client services director that we've just hired, and I've basically been in touch with for all of the 5 years of Notepad, because I wanted to employ her, but I couldn't afford her. And then we finally, she freelanced for a while for us, and then we've just hired her, thank God. And then we've got Will, heads up creative, Johnny heads up strategy. So we've right from the beginning, because they were the earlier hires were the kind of senior people, we've had a leadership team where I've been able to share everything that I'm thinking in terms of vision, and then between us we've been able to
responsibility. So if you break a business down into its component areas like sales and marketing, delivery to clients, you've got people who know it's their responsibility to do that. So you can now start being more of a visionary.
To the most part, I think there are still gaps. Our business model is ever changing, and I think as a founder, you have to be an all-rounder, don't you? You have to be able to do everything. And I still probably get a bit too hands-on in certain areas, but yeah, we're getting there, and we've got a clear path now as to how we can get there, so that I can just be, pure visionary, kind of pure sales is where I want to end up. So
yeah, and I guess you enjoy doing client work, so stepping into that, but when you choose to, rather than having to because of a lack of capacity or a lack of quality team to do the work for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. In those first few years, if you can kind of remember back, I guess it's not too long ago, 5 years. What was your routine like versus what it's like now? Is it the same? Do you go to the office at 9, have your coffee, crack on with work? Or have you had to adapt different routines? I know we spoke about this a couple of years ago because I suffer with anxiety. I have to go through a morning routine. I'm constantly playing around with my routine. I was working out in the morning in order to start work at 9 so that I could work right through to 5 and get more hours done.
Yeah.
But I found that by 2 o'clock, I was like, forget this. I can't work 9 to 5. I need to go and lie down. I can't work high level for that many hours.
Yeah.
So now I've gone back to, drop the kids off at school, gym 9 to 11. I'll work focused from 11 till 3.
Yeah.
And then admin 3 to 5 and then family time. How does your routine look then and how does it look now?
Well, I think right at the beginning, it was utter chaos, as it would be for any business. I think there was no routine. I've always been fortunate, I think, to be one of those people that likes to wake up early. So I've always just got up early naturally. But, right at the beginning, it was just me and a laptop, so I'd kind of wake up, I'd move from one room to the other. I'd work as long as I possibly could. Work as long as I possibly could, work most weekends kind of thing. And so, structure and routine has been something that's been really important. I honestly think without it, you can't last because it's really a marathon, isn't it? Growing a company is, and it although it feels like in the moment, if I work now until 10 o'clock, I can get this done.
Yeah.
That's not a sustainable way of working at all.
No.
I'm really strict with myself now. And, it's something that my wife, Anna, helps me with as well. She'll quite happily sort of push me to finish at 5 because
and it's really good to have that. Don't you think it's really good to have that accountability? Like Kieran does the same to me. If it's something like we have an event and there's a hard stop and she knows, that's fine. But otherwise, if I'm just falling into the trap of working longer and longer, she'll come into the office at 5:01 and say, right, it doesn't matter now.
Yeah.
It's, because once you get to the point where you're earning enough to pay your bills, then it's about fulfilling your potential and leveling up your lifestyle. And that shouldn't necessarily, in my view, everyone have their different standards, but I think you're the same, come at the detriment of your family life.
I agree, man. I think for us, with Notepad, actually, one of the key themes throughout growing the business has been around balance. And it's partly my balance. How am I managing to keep my hours to under sort of 45 hours a week, 40 hours most weeks? But how, most importantly, am I doing that with the team? And I think that's the biggest problem in agency culture, growing agencies, is this expectancy to work until midnight. And, and I've heard some absolute horror stories, mostly from people on our team. I feel like Notepad sometimes is like a survivors club for people that have been through the industry. It's like AA or something. We all talk about how many days we've been clean of ex agency lifestyle, but it's because there's no point in doing it. They do it because they sell the work too cheap, and then they go, the only way to make profit on this is to absolutely, rinse the team's time. They'll do it in 2 days, working, 8 till midnight, instead of the 4 days that it should take.
Which is exactly the same as they do at big accountancy firms. They will understand their numbers, obviously, because they're accountants, but they will be more than happy to say, in exchange for giving you an ACA as a chartered accountant, we're going to expect you to work 14, 16, 18 hours a day sometimes.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
And we know we've got the demand of those juniors on that ACA program, because once you get the ACA and you're a chartered accountant, you're set for life, basically, in terms of earning 50, 60K or whatever. You're never going to be without a job. They are exploiting people. And I don't think necessarily agencies are the same. I think maybe big agencies do that, because if you go and work for, I won't name any names, but some of the big agencies in London, they have so much demand. They do create a budget and they do say this kid's going to have to work X amount.
Yeah. It's an expectancy.
Right.
And
but don't you think in smaller agencies, sometimes it's just a lack of understanding of their finances? So they'll go, we can do this. It's $4,000.
Yeah.
And they don't even think, how many hours is it going to take for phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Who's going to do it? What's their hourly rate?
Well, that's it.
All of these kinds of
It's not
things.
even just the numbers, it's just process. You know, it's one thing that we've realized with Notepad, actually, as boring as it sounds, process and governance is probably one of the things we're best at, because we've just naturally tried to find ways to work more efficiently, work smarter.
Yeah, your whole way, I
outcomes.
remember, of right through from lead proposal through to engagement, through to managing my expectations as a business owner on what's going to happen and when. I don't think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 businesses in the 12 years I've been working that I've partnered with that do it as well as you. Because in a it's true. In a service business, it's all about managing a client's expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why that small changes, big impact thing is really important. And we need to put that back into Growth Factor and not think of it as just a launch GIF. It's actually, that has to be the just do it for Growth Factor, because our clients sometimes expect us to revolutionize their finances in the first 2 weeks of working with them.
Yeah,
amazing.
amazing.
Actually, now we map out almost like a project plan, trying to emulate what you do and say, well, the first 3 months is just about fixing what's currently wrong.
Yeah.
The next 3 months will be about, say, tax planning. The next 3 months is about your personal financial plans. And so you're kind of managing their expectations.
Yeah.
But
agreed.
lots of people don't do that. So if you don't tell the client as an agency, it's going to take this long, and if this happens, it's going to take a bit longer, you're then just having to throw hours at the wall, right?
Yeah, that's it, man. You know, that's how they operate.
And what's been your biggest struggle during this period that you've kind of worked through and then got to a point where now you seem happy? You seem relaxed.
Yeah.
You're moving house, you're married to your lovely wife, Anna, who's supported you. I know you guys always, I follow you on social media. We don't see each other that often, but some of the adventures that you get up to, the travels, the snowboarding, the mountain biking, you're doing these things. You have from socials anyway, which might not be true, the illusion of a good work-life integration, a happy life. What's been your biggest struggle to get to the point where you're at now?
I mean, honestly, if you'd asked me that question, what are we in now? March. 10 months ago, I would have been the opposite of how I am now. I would have been, exhausted and happy just to vent to you, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest learning for me over the last year, and, thank God it's kind of paying off now, is our whole focus for probably the 2 years through COVID, which obviously was an added challenge, was to get to 83 grand a month. We wanted to be £1 million business. That is the number we need to be hitting consistently month on month.
Yeah.
So we basically just did whatever it took to get there. I've realized now where we fell down, but we just fought, as hard as we possibly could. We closed deals as quick as we could. We jumped on every inquiry faster than other agencies. We went above and beyond in pitches. We'd go to the greatest lengths to win that work.
Yeah.
And we got there, and we did it consistently for sort of 6 months, and I was super unhappy. I was like, this is rubbish. If this is now an indication of what it's going to be like at 2 million, I don't want this twice over. So me and Anna, speaking of traveling, we went to Greece for a week, and we're fortunate or unfortunate, fortunate enough to not have kids yet. So we've got a dog who is a problem child, but she was able to go to the
I
in-laws.
think you can say that. It's fine. You should. My advice would be really make the most, to maximize.
Everyone tells us this, so we're trying to do as much.
Not
as
like it's bad.
Can.
They are my whole. I can't talk about them on a podcast because I'll just start crying.
Yeah,
it's like,
I can see you getting emotional.
It's anyway, back to you. Yeah. So it's not like it's a negative. It's just different, and you don't have as much time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I get it. I get it as well. I think as much as my dog isn't a child, I have enjoyed, getting her from rescue to slightly social animal, which is basically the same as what you do with kids. So we went to Greece, and I was totally drained. I wouldn't say I was burned out, but I was absolutely exhausted. I sort of, the luxury of not having kids, I kind of collapsed into a sunbed, and basically slept for 2 days. I couldn't function. And Anna works in a very fast-paced tech company as well, so she was pretty tired herself. So we had a couple of days of basically just recovering, and then just a very open chat. We've always been super open with each other, and my whole perspective was like, if Notepad is still as it is now in a year's time, I don't think I'll be able to do this much longer. It is slowly wearing me down, and it's not why I wanted to set up a business. I have that whole thing in my head, which I know is completely pointless because it's a totally different sort of kettle of fish. But I always think, I could just be a consultant. I could have none of the worries of payroll. I could have a couple of decent clients, and I know that's grass is greener because I've done that and I didn't enjoy it. But in your mind, you're always weighing that up. And so we basically had a really open conversation, and between us, we kind of worked out what had caused it. And ultimately, what we'd done in getting to £1 million wasn't growing a scalable company. We just stretched me as far as we possibly could to get to £1 million. And that's not to say the team weren't working. The team were working, insanely hard. But there was an expectancy because with branding, and particularly a rebrand, if you're a growing company or even a known brand, that's a big decision. And so it's something where typically when we're talking to companies, firstly, 1 in 10 companies we speak to is open to a conversation about a rebrand. The rest are probably all right. They don't need one yet. So it's a very long sales cycle, and typically it's sort of 6 to 9 months before, from meeting them, getting to know them to, okay, let's rebrand your entire business. Let's change everything. And so by that point, I'm their best mate. We kick off the work, and they've bought fully into me. My enthusiasm has kind of won them over. Even if the team have been part of those conversations, there's an expectancy, of course, that I'm going to be involved. So the team are amazing, and actually probably, it's only 1 in 3 now where we go through that process and the client will say, we want Naeem to be involved. We'll actively say it. And then, I'm stuck. I'm basically right. Well, this is a 6-month project and I'm going to be doing everything with the team again. And so we can't scale. So we looked at what is it that we're selling that is things that don't need me, things that I can't do. And I'm not a designer, as you know, I started my life as a journalist and then moved into copywriting. So I love words and I love having an opinion on design, much to the detriment of my team. But I can't make things look great kind of thing. So I sort of started to look into, well, how do you scale design? How do you scale design and content and creative, and less of the big, deep strategic work and more of the stuff that all brands need every day. And we've been, I know this is a long story, but it kind of brings it to life. Our biggest client or biggest client at the time was the whiskey brand Glenmorangie, and we won that account. We won that relationship through sheer enthusiasm. They didn't need a rebrand. They just spent an astronomical amount with an agency in London on a rebrand, and fair enough, the brand is quite nice. There are some challenges with it, but it's working. But they wanted to work with us, so we had this really nice organic relationship where they trusted us and we trusted them, and between us, we worked out what we could do for them. And actually what we ended up doing was becoming very much their on-tap design partner. So, all the design work they needed doing, they could turn to us and just, they've got this incredible in-house team with LVMH. They've got their own brand team, but even so, there's a massive bottleneck in content for social or landing page design or presentations or reports.
It's nice for them to have some flexibility.
Exactly.
And the standard that they require.
Yeah. And then, digging deeper into that, the thing we sort of recognized is that with a business that size, the typical relationship between a brand and agency is, 3 to 5 year retainer. Unbelievable fees, and we've heard cases of sort of, 200-300 grand a month with some brands, not with Glenmorangie, but with other brands we work with. And you're tied in. So you kind of, although they're doing good work for you, you're kind of turning up to that monthly meeting with the agency going, right, well, we haven't really had time to think about what we need from you this month. So can we have a quick chat and work some stuff out?
Yeah.
So the agency goes away, designs up some landing pages, maybe does a campaign, creative or something.
Yeah.
And you haven't even thought about whether that was needed or not. You get the work.
Yeah, it's not part of a longer term plan.
Exactly.
It's very reactive.
It's very reactive, and it's a bit scrappy and last minute. And there's no flexibility. You can't turn them off for a month if you haven't got any work for them. So we developed a whole new proposition called Amplify, which is there's a, if you go on the website now, you'll see it's got this kind of like SaaS model to it with it's all about transparent fixed pricing. And essentially what it is a solution to kind of remove the creative bottleneck in businesses.
Okay.
And what's so exciting about it is, I over the years, I've been lucky enough to work with some really big brands on little pieces of work and stuff.
Yeah.
If I was speaking to Lego or Meta, we're not going to talk about a rebrand. As much as I would like to, be the agency that rebrands Lego, they are all right from a branding perspective. They're doing okay. So it would be, a pointless conversation. But now if I speak to a brand like that and I say, okay, help me understand what you're doing in terms of content, right? And is there a limit to how much you can do there? Would you want to do more? Of course they're going to say yes. Every team is stretched and every team has a bottleneck somewhere.
Yeah.
So we kind of exist now to be that flexible, no long-term tie-in kind of partner to these bigger brands. And it's just been amazing because we've, in the last 6 months, we've spoken to ASOS, and the whole group, Topshop and Collusion, spoken to Lego, spoken to Meta, MailChimp, all these enormous brands who wouldn't give us the time of day, a couple of years ago.
If you were just saying,
do you want to rebrand?
Yeah. And that's, computer says no, because that's what we have to do before we'll engage with you to do anything ongoing. We're not happy if someone else has done the brand.
Exactly. So that's so in terms of the biggest learning, what we're now doing, which is really exciting. And I think I probably had to do the 5 years of not really thinking about scale properly until now to learn this, is every element of what we're doing, we're thinking about scale. So even our new sales process, right from day one, we mapped it out so it wasn't all on me. So I'm part of the sales journey, but people know their roles, they know their responsibilities in terms of generating leads and nurturing clients and stuff. And what that's meant now is I feel like we're kind of on the precipice of real kind of explosive growth, which is it's fun. It's what's kind of why we want to do it. And it's the biggest problem for agencies, man, is sales. It's probably the same in accountancy. Like if you had more leads than you could possibly deal with, you'd find a way to deliver it. I
think what you get eventually to the point, probably we've been going 12 years now, probably in the 10th year, we got to the point where we were like, okay, well, we could literally take on 2 or 3 big clients a week. And because we've got all the internal processes bang on, because we've been iterating them for the last 10 years, we would not let a client down.
Yeah, exactly
what we're doing.
Exactly. And that's, and I think that's when people talk about these agencies, the fastest growing agency in X kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just because they're great at sales. They've just absolutely smashed the sales engine
or sales and marketing. Like if you look at, I love Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. His agency was one of the fastest growing businesses. I think that although he inflated the numbers and got in trouble for that recently, it still got from 0 to 6 or 7 million in turnover pretty quickly.
Unbelievably fast.
And that's the leads being generated, but then also being converted.
Interesting thing on Stephen's story, because years ago, ran an event in an agency I was working in, and we got him in as a speaker. And this was quite early on in the days of Social Chain. And lucky enough to kind of have a chat with him afterwards to work out, how have you done this? How have you gone from, and there's partly, they had a really clever model in that they owned these huge social media accounts that they'd either created or bought. So they had a platform that other agencies didn't have. But they said that, or Stephen said that, actually, for the first couple of years, they were doing everything that an agency would do. They were doing all kinds of marketing, spending astronomical amounts, and they'd raised a bit of investment. They chucked it all straight into things that weren't really getting return. And they did a bit of analysis internally on, all right, what's the activity we're doing and where are the leads actually coming from? And 80% of the leads were from Stephen talking,
right?
Just doing public speaking.
So the lesson there is Well, there's two. From your previous conversation point, it's look at all your internal processes and how can you extract yourself as an owner from the ones that don't require you and you don't enjoy.
Exactly.
If you're getting to the point of overwhelm, stress, and burnout,
yeah,
sit down with someone else and work out, who's not in your business, and work out why you've got to that point.
That's it. Because you won't see it.
A plan to get back to loving your business again.
Yeah.
And then in terms of growth of an agency or a service business, run lots of different lead generation tactics and strategies, but then collect the data on all of them.
That's it, man. Yeah.
And then every quarter, review where the leads are actually coming from.
That's it. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, which ties into that. Because with Social Chain, Stephen said they almost turned everything else off. Yeah. They put everything into building his personal brand. They put him on every stage.
He enjoys, because I think he enjoys.
Loves it.
I'd love it if we could put this podcast out. It helped people, because the idea of this podcast being founder stories, which I came up with, which I actually love, after going through 10, 15 names with someone else and then ignoring all of them in the middle of the night thinking, founder stories.
Yeah, nice.
Because it's the origin.
Yeah.
Is Diary of a CEO to me is really inspirational, but you can't really take action from it. It's very contextual.
Yeah.
And it's about the founder's mentality or struggles, or he really tries to get emotion out of them, which is what's entertaining to watch, but it's not necessarily that useful or practical, actionable advice. If this podcast can end up being something that people come to every week to help their business grow, that will generate leads, because people will be thinking, well, who is Grow Factor? Grow Factor sponsors this podcast. Let me check them out.
Yeah, of course.
And if I could get to the point where I'm only doing the podcast and I love talking to people, as you do.
Yeah.
That's
what a lovely place
to be.
Isn't it? Yeah, lovely place to spend
your time. You don't have
to
dance around making TikTok videos.
You don't have to do that anyway.
I have done that. I jumped in my Porsche when I had a Porsche at one point. We had an agency helping us, and then jumped back out the other side, and then was doing star jumps in front of the car, and they turned it into this. The reel got lots of views.
Yeah.
But I just stopped at one point and thought, this is not authentic with who I am.
Yeah, exactly. But you tested it, and that's the thing with this podcast as well. Although, I think this is a really good idea and will scale and will grow. Once you've done the first season, you'll then have really clear kind of numbers on what's happened. I mean, as a general rule, one of the things we say to people doing podcasts that we've picked up from somewhere, I don't know where, is that it's by episode 100 that you really start to feel the effects of a podcast. And my friend Ali runs a really good one, mainly with kind of endurance athletes, and it talks a lot about hardship and struggle and how they use exercise to combat that and stuff. And he's approaching that number now. And I remember him being on like episode 8 and being like, I don't know if this is worth it. I was like, carry on, you'll get there.
Keep going.
Yeah, and it's a slog. But I think that's one thing with channels I think will be useful for the listeners, because as a founder, I think business founders are amongst, when they do it right, they're amongst the best marketers in the world, because we're the ones that pay the price if we don't get the sales, if we don't get the leads. So although you have to hire people that are smarter than you to help you scale and deliver, if you ever need a real life MBA in marketing, I think it's try and run a business, because you force yourself to do these things. And one of the things now that we have this new quite disruptive proposition with Amplify, we've never really been able to do things like PPC, because if you run a PPC ad that says, is your brand letting you down, or, what do people think about you when you're not in the room? It might generate some intrigue, but it's not going to be it's going to be, you're into the cycle.
It's the start of a really long journey.
Exactly. Yeah. But now if we can say, creative team, feeling the stretch kind of thing, we can take some of that heavy lifting off the table. They'll be like, yeah, sweet. And so it's opened up different areas for us to explore now. And the approach we're taking with marketing, which has taken me a while to learn, I think, in kind of SME marketing, because when you work with a big brand, you have an established brand, an established voice, established customers. It's all different. When we've done work with Nike running in the past, they'd hate me for saying Nike, and what you're doing there in terms of doing a big campaign or a big piece of strategic work, is you're just moving the dial by 1 point. You know, you're hoping that you're going to increase sales by X or increase footfall by X or something. With a small business, you know, you're massively taking leaps to try and hit the next target. So I've just read a book which I'd really recommend, actually. And I think there are 2 books with the same title. And so maybe you can drop it in the notes afterwards as to which one I'm talking about. But it's called Traction, and it's mainly about how to run small tests with only the channels that are worth your time to get you to the next number. So you're not thinking about, you know, how do we get from 1 to 10 million? So if we know our next goal is 2 million, we've outlined they do it in the book, actually. They outline all the channels that you could possibly use, the ones which typically startups use to really accelerate their growth. Go through them as a team, come up with ideas for all of those channels, even if they don't feel right for your business. And then between you work out, all right, in terms of running an experiment, which isn't going to cost the earth, which ones of these should we try first? And start running those as small experiments. And the thing I really like about that approach is I've been told over and over again the last 2 or 3 years that the approach to marketing an agency is to look at all the channels. There are, you know, over 40 channels that agencies typically use to market themselves, and do them all. So, you know, make sure you tick every single one of those boxes, and that's PR, SEO, PPC, all these things that no single team can actively do until you're 100 people, probably. So what was happening to us was we were trying to make our way through those lists, and we'd get a couple of things going quite well, and then we'd, you know, let's get 10 going this quarter. And we take our eye off what was working well and focus on something else. And it was always just 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So I think as a smaller business, the right approach is you need to have the basics in place. You've got to have, you know, content and visibility and all that sort of stuff to reinforce the buyer decision. But ultimately, just run small tests on the channels that you think are going to serve the greatest results. And if it works, if you get decent leads, if you get some sales, ideally, work out how you can double down on that channel. And you know, for us, the recent experiments we've been running are that we're really good at PPC in terms of social PPC, but we're jumping too quickly to the end. So we're kind of going, here's the problem that you have as as someone managing a big brand. Here's our website. Book a call. And of course that's not going to work. You know, you're not going to commit to our minimum monthly spend is $4,000 a month. So even that for a big business, although it's typically not money based at that sort of level of buyer, they're still like, oh, I don't know if I can, you know, work out the PO
you need
for
to show
$4,000.
Some value.
Exactly.
Without charging them anything.
That's
to build some trust, right?
Yeah. So we've stretched it out. We've put a big, you know, sequence of kind of nurturing in and a very personable way of doing that. We're not looking at the moment as to, you know, those kind of email nurture sequences or anything fully automated. We're doing it very manually and actually trying to build really nice relationships with good people, and it's working. You know,
which I think is the way. If you're trying to sell a service at a higher value, I definitely think, having experimented and tried to do the 40 channels and all of these things, the personalized approach is the way forward. And also just tracking 3 metrics. If you track cost of acquisition across all of these experiments, you can compare one experiment to another, because ultimately you want to stick with the 2 or 3 things that give you the lowest cost of acquisition of your client. Track how long your clients are staying with you, and always have 2 or 3 strategies in place to lengthen how much they're spending with you. Can you get them spending an extra £100 a month? So the 4 becomes 4,100 across a long time period. That makes a massive difference. And if you're looking at those 3 things, so length of time they stay with you, how much do they spend, and the cost of acquisition, and you're constantly thinking about those as an owner, you could really, I mean, I would advise you to look at other things, but you could just look at those and not go too far wrong.
Yeah, of course. And that's one of the other learnings for me, really, that one of my mentors helped me understand is if you know, our big clients, when we nail it, can be spending anywhere from sort of, you know, 15 to 40 grand a month. Don't need that many. You know, we're not looking for 1,000
it's
clients.
Not tear your hair out, run around, have 10 coffees, develop a vape addiction, like get in this massive, going back to what you said, I got myself in a massive state of high dopamine in January, because we had a few things happen in December, and I really wanted to get back on track with our financial goals in January. And I just went crazy. And it was fine because it worked. But what I realized was by mid-February, I was just burnt out.
Yeah, of course.
And then listening to a lot of Huberman stuff, and if you ever listen to his podcast, and Dr. Peter Attia, I realized that, and I explained this to my kids and they actually understood it. You know, dopamine is like a wave pool. It can go and things can be great for a period of time. These waves are coming, you've got so much energy, you're getting so much done. But if you turn that on too much for too long, that water starts spilling out. Ultimately, that reservoir will just go down to zero.
Yeah.
There's hardly anything in it. The no waves can be produced anymore, and you're burnt. You're done. Now you need to wait 2 or 3 weeks where you remove I developed a vape addiction because I went to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and one of my mates bought me one, gave it to me. And who knew nicotine was so addictive? Yeah. Anyway, 3 months later, I've got off it. Well, then you get down from 10 coffees to 1 coffee.
Yeah.
Then you're actually being a lot more slow and patient with your time, because I totally agree with what you said. Being in business is about patient, incremental progress.
Yeah.
And not forcing yourself to feel bad when you're not hitting these notional financial targets, and then having to ramp yourself up on stimulants to pump up dopamine just to get through 12, 14-hour days.
Yeah.
To do things that you don't really want to do. You have to constantly ask yourself, is the routine I had this week sustainable? Could I do this for the next 10 years and still be enjoying it? And if you can, that's the right routine for you. Otherwise, you need to dial the hours down, change your routine, the things that you're doing, all of these things. And I think for me, one of the things I worked out with my mentor this week is that our business needs flexible resource on tap. So Amplify, we're too small for you probably, but Amplify for businesses makes total sense to me, because you're never going to have a direct alignment between your needs as a business and the capacity of your internal team.
Yeah.
There'll always be ebbs and flows. And if you have access to flexible capacity at the same level as your internal team, or higher outside in a number of different areas.
Yeah.
So maybe a great PR agency on tap, a great marketing team like you guys, content, creative, a virtual finance director, all of these other things are set up. You don't need to build this really big, overhead heavy internal team. You can have 2 or 3 other leadership people, the rest of your service delivery team, and then 5 or 6 key partners outside, plus your lower level freelancers that you might go to sometimes. And you've got a business that could scale to 10, 15 million pounds.
Absolutely. And I think the trap I fell into with that, and it's something that you just see, isn't it? Everyone's obsessed with headcount, particularly in my industry. You'll be at a networking event for agency owners and they'll ask what you do. And the second question is always, how many staff do you have?
Yeah.
And I used to take real pride in saying, we're 10 now, we're 15 now. I actually look the other way now. Like, I don't want to take on many more full-time people, because we don't need to. If anything, we're slightly overstaffed, I'd say. And having a network of trusted, top tier, world-class kind of freelancers, not only gives us that flexibility, it gives us access to amazing talent as well. So 100%. The work just goes through the roof.
And if they stop performing, see you later.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're not an employee. So that, and the employees, we're lucky that, I do see, we've always kind of focused on hiring incredible people, much to the detriment of how much profit we make, because they're all very expensive. But we've hired very, very good, I think, the best people for the job every time we've had a role going, which has given us this amazing in-house ability. But there are still skills, outside the business that we don't have access to, that we really need access to at times. So, you're absolutely right. And just as a final argument to that as well, in our industry, the creative industries, 40% of the workforce is now freelance.
Yeah.
So if nearly half of all the talent in the world is already freelance, why would we ignore that?
And that's the way things are going. So I sat down with my mentor this week and I said, look, I really think I need to hire a managing director, because I've been through this process of stress and overwhelm.
Yeah.
And I need to hire a marketing director, because it's on me to create the content plans, to create the strategy. And he just turned around straight away without even thinking about it and said, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You find a world-class person to come in on a project basis to start with, to map out your content for the year. Then you have a monthly meeting with them, which you pay them for. You get the best person you can. You don't need a full-time person. Same with a managing director. What is there to manage? What processes have you got that are not working that you need a managing director for?
You're right. Absolutely.
Like, calm yourself down.
Yeah.
You do not need one with a business that turns over £2 million. You don't need a full-time managing director. You need to do that. You need to have the integrator, which in our business is Yasser. to make sure that the clients are happy, the work's getting out the door to the right standard, the team are managed. You need that person. We have 6 people in our UK team and then 20 plus people in our offshore team. So who's in charge of the offshore team? It's one of our accountants. Who's in charge of our 6 accountants? It's Yasser. So you need someone looking at team, but you don't need necessarily in the modern world, I think, until you hit sort of 10 mil plus, a managing director to get your time down. But one of the things that is really important, we could talk all day, but I'll try and start wrapping up, is I know that in order to make decisions about staffing, who can you afford? When can you afford them? What can we do from a marketing perspective? What does our cash flow look like? You have to have a good focus on your finances. And one of the people that I think every business should have is a CFO or a finance director. And you can afford that, but you have to scale that up over time. So you might start off with a call every 3 months, then a call every month, then a call every 2 weeks. But I think you should have a virtual finance director, an accountant, a bookkeeper, a payroll person, all working for the same company, but they're not in your organization. They're external. So how important has it been for you to focus on your finances and have a team that you can lean on at Growth Factor?
Well, absolutely. Because it's one of those things, isn't it? Running a business, no matter what your skill set or your interest, you have to learn how to manage cash flow. It's kind of critical.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I naturally would, say is in my skill set. I think it's something I've had to learn slowly. I can look at a P&L now, particularly an agency P&L, and immediately understand where they could improve, what's going wrong, kind of thing. But I wouldn't have got there without all the modeling work we did at the beginning. And even the tools that you kind of implemented, we still use now. Like we still use Float every day.
Yeah, being able to ask questions over time,
exactly,
incrementally increases your financial intelligence and understanding. And things like Float, which for listeners is an online tool you can plug into Xero, which all of our clients use to manage cash flow. And at the start, we spend a lot of time working together at that time on how does this work? How can you keep this up to date yourself?
Yeah.
And in a service business where you're maybe billing up front a large amount of money, and then you're having to make sure that lasts, and you don't think, happy days, let's all go to Vegas.
Done that a few times. Not Vegas, but spent everything. Yeah.
But understanding that isn't money you've earned in this month, it's money over 6 months. So it needs to be spread in the profit and loss account. So you start to understand accruals accounting, and you need to manage the cash flow appropriately, right? If you didn't have that system in place and that team and that live cash flow forecasting, what do you think would be different? Do you think the risk of failure would be higher? Do you think things would be exactly the same?
Yeah, I just don't think we'd grow. I think we'd be running around in circles, because without that stuff in place, and it is, it's one of the other reasons I'm more excited about moving to the Amplify sort of service model, is it's very hard to make decisions because you have no visibility on, what's coming in, how long is cash typically going to last, where are we spending money, where could we be saving money, all that sort of stuff. I think, in its simplest form, running a business is money in, money out, isn't it? So without that, and I have no direct sort of, problem with businesses that raise investment, but honestly, some of the companies we work with, we obviously we work with bigger companies now, but we work with a lot of investment-backed businesses over the years, particularly in tech. Some of them, run amazingly and do really well. Some of them don't. And I think investment for lots of businesses makes them lazy and makes them make silly decisions.
Large cash reserves.
So it's got, for 3 million sat in the bank, you're going to go, of course we'll hire a sales team.
They're not necessarily tracking the return on investment of their spend.
Exactly. And then they're also just, running these wild experiments with money and things. And I think, knowing what I know now, I understand why capital can help fuel growth when a business is ready to scale.
Yeah.
But I would be so fearful of raising investment for a company that hadn't yet proved scale, not just sales, because I think there's a feeling that, if you sold a couple of clients or a couple of customers, then you've got a scalable model. You haven't. You've proven that there was a market need at that time for that person. If you can show that it can be done on scale, and then there's this huge market that hasn't been captured, absolutely raise some money and throw it in. But I think running a business organically with, and maybe leaning on access to capital when you need it. So, the taking a short-term loan or using your overdraft.
Startup loans company and
exactly
other things to get that first 25k to get you off the ground.
Yeah, and you do need it. Even with switching from small clients to big clients, we had the challenge of going from SMEs who probably don't have the savviest sort of payment processes and will agree, to pay you 50% of the project up front and stuff, which is wonderful as an agency. Whereas a big company is going to go, no, we'll pay you
3 months.
You can wait 90 days and you'll get that payment 30 days afterwards. And it will be only once that work has been signed off.
You're going to get paid.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you start to understand things about invoice factoring.
Exactly.
And access to capital up front and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just, and I realize that more now. Capital is the fuel, isn't it? You need it at times.
100%. And as an owner, to be able to sleep at night, knowing that you've got 6 months or a year's worth of your fixed costs in the bank at any time.
Yeah.
And we teach the 3 bank account system and things like that. Just to sort of make sure, I think, to be honest, I've really enjoyed the conversation. There's so much in there that if I was a business owner and I had a service business, not even necessarily an agency, but especially an agency, I would be going back and re-listening to this and writing down, what are you going to change? What actions are you going to take as a result of listening to this podcast? Don't just make it something that's nice to listen to in the car. And then if you are listening to it in the car, go and listen to it in an environment where you can take notes. Either repeating some of the points that you've made earlier, but try and imagine you've got like a 60-second timer on you. What are your 3 keys to success that you could share with others? So maybe one for the startup phase, one for the scale-up phase, and one for the more established phase.
Okay.
We haven't prepped any of this, by the way.
No,
Naeem has not seen any of the questions. I wrote most of them this morning.
I'm on the spot, but that's fine. I can do it. So startup phase, I'll look at this through a branding lens because that's where I can probably help the most in terms of growth. I think startup phase, my advice would be invest in brand. I think actually there's an awful lot to be said for great design. Even if you're still working out your proposition, try to, I know it costs money, but try to avoid stock photography, try to get real photography done. Even if it's just your mate that's a photographer that can do a 1-day shoot, capture some good photos of your team.
The iPhone 14 Pro now is amazing.
Well, it's better than most SLRs. The means are there now, and there's no excuse really for just looking like another company with the same stock photos and Unsplash. So avoid that. And so I would invest in it. I think at the scale up phase, it's absolutely about thinking, how can you grow a business that sells, something that isn't on you to deliver? And then what are the roles you need to fulfill that? I think that's the key learning for me is actually the difference between running a 1-person consultancy with support and running a scalable business is that, it's kind of go from selling yourself and your skills to selling the skills of the team and the value that they bring.
What does that team need to look like? Yeah,
exactly. Have a really clear, we've got an org chart now for, we've got 7 different org charts from here until 5 million. And I know, exactly where hopefully people in the team are going to end up.
Yeah.
I know who we need to bring in. I know our structure.
They know their progression as well.
Exactly. It's really clear. It's visible to everyone. And then in the big brand kind of space, I think my honest sort of, takeaway for massive brands is to stop doing what everyone else is doing. I think there's been this incredibly depressing movement in branding recently, particularly if you look at, the big tech companies or the big fashion houses where everyone is looking like each other and, saying the same things. And there are certain brands, so Burberry is a really good example, that have just broken free of that mold. They've taken their logo from the 1920s or whatever it was, they've redesigned it, and they've come out with this aesthetic that's totally different to the rest of the industry. And that's what branding's for. It's ultimately you're trying to be distinct. If you're trying to be memorable and remember something different to everyone else, don't do what everyone else is doing. And take lessons as well at that size from businesses outside of your industry and look at startups that are doing some of the most effective, distinct marketing, in the world. And it's because they're small and they've got a blank canvas and not all this bureaucracy internally. I think that bravery is what's going to help bigger businesses to set themselves apart.
And they could almost set up small sub-teams within their big organization that have freedom and flexibility.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Naeem, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to get in touch with you, and this, I guess, is more for well, I guess who are Notepad working with?
Yeah.
And then we can say, you know, how would you get in touch?
Well, yeah, I mean, our focus is working, it's two areas at the moment. We're working with one thing we haven't touched on, but we're a B Corp. We're a certified B Corporation. Just means we have a triple bottom line. So we're profit, people and planet. We are focused primarily at the moment on trying to work with other B Corps because they hold themselves to the same standards.
Yeah.
And they're doing good, you know, for the world. And then we're also working with, you know, big household name brands that have a focus on being responsible. Like Glenmorangie, you wouldn't think of it of a whiskey brand, but the work they do around sustainability is unbelievable. So it kind of, it fits really well with us. So we're kind of focused on that space, but I also love helping people. So, you know, and we've worked with plenty of SMEs. I'm obviously growing an SME
like
myself.
Us, when you worked with us, we were probably 500k sales.
Exactly.
But we decided a significant amount of that, we were happy to invest with Notepad because it would be a long-term investment.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we have SME clients, you know, quite a few of them. And it's often it's more strategic. It's, you know, it's kind of getting, like you said, it's getting the house in order and getting everything going and then helping them scale. But I'm always, you know, I think the reason we work in service businesses is because we like helping people. So
yeah, we like meeting new people.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone does have any questions, they are more than welcome to.
What's the best way for people?
Probably find me on LinkedIn because I get too many emails. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn
and your name is Naeem, which my kids thought was hilarious. I literally went round for about 10 minutes saying, Naeem is coming. What's his name? Naeem. His name is Naeem. Yeah, a 7-year-old trying to explain it. I had to write it down for them.
Yeah.
I mean, an adult should be able to.
Mate, that's my whole life. That's, you know, that's my...
On LinkedIn, you're Naeem.
That's it, yeah.
Alvi.
Assinder.
Assinder.
Because we've joined ourselves.
We'll put the links in the description. But it's been an absolute pleasure, buddy. Thanks for joining me. And thank you guys for listening to episode 2 of Founder Stories, and we'll see you in the next one.